Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo. The combine is over, but we're going to talk about some of the more important parts of that being the cornerbacks who looked really good running their drills and the interest the Steelers showed in them, as well as receivers and other key players that were at the combine. All that here and more in the North Shore Drive podcast. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. We were here in Indianapolis all week long. I'm still here. Ray is back home. I stuck around for offensive linemen. We're recording this on Saturday, so we won't have any of the Saturday afternoon or or any of the Sunday drills in here. But there's still a lot to talk about. We'll be going over a lot of them, starting off with talk about the cornerbacks. But as always, the show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And they're rotating new ones in and out every day. Go to Mike's Beer Bar to experience the best bar in Pittsburgh. More on them later. Ray, we got a chance to talk to the corners, I believe on Thursday. Thursday is when we talked to corners, because Friday was receivers, and then Saturday was linemen. Correct. So we talked to the corners on Thursday, and we got a chance to talk to, but then they got to run Friday. There were some burners out there. Nate Wiggins ran the fastest 40-time. Quinyon Mitchell right behind him. There were some really great athletes. We also found out who the Steelers haven't been talking to. It seems like the Steelers met with a lot of those top flight cornerbacks, and there seem to be quite a few of them that people are saying are worth a first round pick.
Yeah, listen, Nate Wiggins, Chris, I think he ran a 4.28. Yes. Official. I was there at the podium with him, and the thing that stuck out with me, you could tell he was a very confident kid. Mm-hmm. He is rail thin. Yes. And I looked up his weight. I'm not sure what his official weight was, but 173 is what I saw. Yes. And that's pretty thin for a corner. So he's got the frame to put on some weight, but I do think there would be perhaps some durability issues with him early in his career until he got in a really good strength and conditioning program. But when you look at that speed and you look at what he did at Clemson, he's undoubtedly a first-round pick, and he's got potential for sure to be there at 20. He entered college at 17 years old. He's coming out at 20 years old. So, you hear a lot of talk about what this guy's ceiling is and what his floor is. His ceiling is up here. I don't know what he would be like as a rookie, but he's got probably the most potential, or perhaps some of the most potential of anyone in this cornerback draft class.
Quinyon Mitchell was the guy who came in second in the 40-yard dash, 4.33 seconds, and he's not skinny. He's pretty well built. He's a very strong guy. He's from out of Toledo. There are some saying that he might have this combine performance might have vaulted him into being the top corner. Some people say it's still Terrion Arnold from Alabama. But again, I think the thing is that there are just so many corners that you can look at in this draft class and say, this guy has a claim to being the best corner in this class. This guy has a claim to being the best corner in this class. There's like 4 or 5 guys that you can debate about are in this conversation. And again, that's a good thing for the Steelers, because the more there are, like there's 4 or 5 guys there. There's a lot of offensive tackles. We know the quarterback's going to be a run there. Wide receiver's going to be a run there. There's a good chance the Steelers can get a shot at a guy who, people talk about as potentially as the best cornerback in a draft class.
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell keeps checking the boxes. Great Senior Bowl week. Obviously, nailed the combine as well. The only step left, really, is this pro day. And, we'll see what that brings whenever the Rockets have their pro day. But he was really impressive in Mobile, and he did nothing in Indianapolis that disappointed either. So you have him. And, you mentioned Arnold. He didn't run fast. He was like a 4.5 guy. Mm-hmm. But, he obviously played in the SEC, has the tape. His athleticism is really good otherwise. But, if you are concerned about deep speed, running a 4.5 or so probably isn't what you wanted to see out of Terrion Arnold. So I don't know if he damaged himself there. I think there's enough on tape, and he's a great athlete otherwise, other than the deep speed, that he's still going to be okay. But when you debate these corners, I think you're right. Is it Wiggins? Is it Arnold? Is it Mitchell? You certainly could get three different answers if you talk to three different people.
Right. And I think that's what's interesting about this. And we still have to go through pro days and then all this stuff, and we'll see what conversations are had. And we'll also see, what are the Steelers at in free agency? Because if they get like a really good corner in free agency, corner becomes less of a priority in the draft. And then it might be like, okay, how do you use your draft capital in that situation? There's a lot of different directions the Steelers could go. But the bottom line, it seems like they are. But we talked about how they talked to a lot of linebackers, because that's clear. The guys that were the top linebackers in the draft class, it was clear that they were interested in that. It's very clear the Steelers are interested in cornerback just as much as any other position. And I think that's a good sign for them, because Joey Porter Jr. needs a long-term partner. And as you brought up, they also need to find a body to replace Shannon Sullivan. They still need a slot corner. There's a lot of holes that need to be filled. And that's where, a deep cornerback class that's really talented, that's really athletic, that can make the world of difference.
Yeah, they're going to draft a cornerback, Chris. I guess the only question is, where in this draft are you going to get it? I think first round, you're getting an outside corner, yes, starter, probably day one starter. Round two, you could probably still get an outside corner. I'm not sure if it'd be, ready to step in and be a starter. Round three or after, you're probably looking at the slot guys. Maybe second round for some of the slot guys, because they do play a lot of snaps. But those big, tall, rangy corners that the Steelers want to play with, they're going to be going off the board in round one and early to mid round two.
I think that's a great projection. Is right there, and it's just going to be about what's the value of that versus some of the offensive tackles who are out there, because that's another position to need, and is where does center fit in all this? It's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers do in free agency to kind of set the table for that. Because that has to happen first. Typically, the Steelers they like to go into drafts without any major glaring holes, and sometimes you can't help it, but they do their best to not be in that situation so that it's not obvious who they're trying to pick. I think the Steelers right now, as they stand, they have a lot of needs, and that's not good. But if they can, I think, support the team with some good additions, in free agency, in different spots, you can provide answers there that are temporary and people can respect them, and it can hide your intent on draft day. But if you're able to do that, keep people off your scent and go get your guy that's really on your big board, that was the best player available at 20. I think that's the bottom line, is making sure that that's done in the end of this process.
Yeah, what we definitely do know after talking to Omar Khan is the Steelers feel very confident about this draft overall, and especially in the first round. So
yes,
at number 20, you are going to get a very good player, quite possibly a guy who's going to be able to step in for you and play as a rookie. Might not start day one as a rookie, but you're going to get a Broderick Jones or Joey Porter type of player at number 20. This is a quality draft, Chris.
Absolutely. We'll talk about the receiver side of this draft on the other side of the break here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 20 televisions for you to enjoy whatever sporting event you want. You can even reserve a television of your choice to be on a specific game that you want to make sure you're following while you're enjoying some good brews. And you go there and enjoy good beer because they have so many options. 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area, and 8 of those local beers are available on tap. Don't believe me? Go there today and see all the beers that are available at all times, and how they're switching new ones in and out every single day to make sure that whenever you go there, you can have a different experience if you really want. It's Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go there, also try Steak on a Stone, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. Every piece that you cut off, you press into the stone, and you choose how well done you want every single bite at Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about receivers. Now, I know there's some people out there that are like, why should the Steelers care about receivers? They got Diontae Johnson, they got George Pickens. Like they shouldn't be looking too hard into that. Well, I think, and you and I have talked about this on our own time, Ray. I think I look at the Steelers situation as they need to find whoever is going to pair with George Pickens for the future right now, because Diontae Johnson's in the last year of his contract, and I'm not certain that they're going to renew that contract and add some more years to it. I think the Steelers are going to put themselves in a position where George Pickens is their number one, and then a rookie that's drafted this year can be number two, and then they have a solid veteran, and then Calvin Austin as their new receiving core moving forward. Ray, if the Steelers take a receiver this year, what round do you think they would do it in?
Day 2 or after. I could see anywhere, second round, third round. You got 2 fourth-round picks. I said, somewhere in that range from 51 until 120. They got 4 picks there, and I think a receiver is likely to come off the board there. When you look at it, Chris, it's either we're going to find out in July or August. It's either going to be Diontae Johnson's going to be the number one of the future. They're going to sign him to another deal, and George Pickens wouldn't get a second contract, or it's going to be the other way, which I think right now I'm leaning that Johnson won't be back and Pickens would be the number one of the future. But there's still time for them to sort of go through that. Pickens has had a lot of issues on and off the field here, so I'm not going to crown him after he's coming off a very uneven second season in the NFL. Let's put it that way. So I still think that's to be determined a little bit. But regardless, you need somebody to pair with your number one over the next 4 years or so. And I think this is a perfect draft to do it. Daniel Jeremiah, who analyzed the draft for the NFL Network, 12 receivers in his top 50. Basically, 1 out of every 4 players on his top 50 board are receivers. So that tells you about the quality of this draft. Now, if they all come off the board in that order and he's right there, then, maybe they're not going to get, one of the top receivers in this draft. But it's pretty good beyond that, too. I mocked Javon Baker to them in the 4th round, the first one. It's a quality draft beyond that, too. So, I could see, if he's got 14 in his top 50, there might be 20 to 22 in the top 100. So,
yeah, makes sense.
It guys beyond the 2nd round and even deep into the 3rd, maybe early 4th round as well.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be. It seems like this happens a lot of years now. Like there's receivers every year that you're just wowed by, and then there's depth in those years with guys like that. So the Steelers could be in a situation where they can go and get their top need on defense, their new offensive lineman of the future, their new cornerback of the future, and then come back and get a new playmaking wide receiver who can try to make life easier on Kenny Pickett or whoever's their quarterback. I can totally see that. And I can also see the potential for the Steelers putting themselves in this position where they can protect themselves about Diontae Johnson's future contract. And also, finding a guy that you can put yourself in the same position with George Pickens, next year, where let's say they go and get like Roman Wilson of Michigan. Again, that's just the name of the guy I like. And he lights it up and he's killing it left and right. And everyone's like, I don't know, maybe he's the future. You don't have to commit either way, but if you knew that you were going to build the receivers around him and you wanted to move George Pickens, again, not saying this is what's going to happen, but that gives you that flexibility if you find your guy in this draft who can be that. And let's face it, the Steelers, with all the things that they're paying right now, they can't pay 2 big name wide receivers on this team. So I think that it just makes a lot of sense to pick where you're at. But also, Ray, they talk to guys like Adonai Mitchell and Brian Thomas of LSU. Those are guys that some people say will go in the 1st round. It seems like they're keeping all their options open.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when it's a draft that's this deep at receiver, and one of these guys might fall into your lap at 20, if all the tackles you want are off the board, and you don't value center at 20, then yeah, I could see them definitely do that. I don't think it's a high chance right now, but receiver is a big need. Just for what we talked about here, it's something that they need to build for, not only for the present, because you need 3 quality receivers every year, but again, for the future as well. So, a lot of people talk about, well, Arthur Smith, he doesn't really need receivers. He's a running game guy, uses his tight ends a lot. Listen, he had A.J. Brown, who was an early second-round pick down in Tennessee. That wasn't his fault. I don't even think he was there when they let him go for nothing. So that was a management decision. A.J. Brown was an excellent receiver back then. And previously to that, they invested a high pick in Corey Davis. Now, Corey Davis didn't work out, but every team's goal, no matter how you're built, Steelers are built through the trenches. We know that. This is the year 2023. You need weapons around your quarterback. Receivers are always going to be important. Let's not lose sight of that. Do not be surprised at all if the Steelers take a receiver on the first 2 days of the draft. They desperately need one. We don't know anything really about Calvin Austin III.
Right.
We know Miles Boykin is a special teams player. They basically have 2 receivers right now, and they got to go add to that group.
I agree. It's a big need. They need to figure that out. We'll talk about other big needs that they have and how it matches up with guys at the combine right after this break here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, talking about our experiences, the things we learned at the NFL Combine. Ray, I think we're seeing the official visits. I think one observation that everyone's kind of concluded is that the Steelers' formal interviews and meetings with a lot of the players in this draft class, a lot of them at this stage, if they got you at the Senior Bowl, it seemed like they were okay letting you not doing a formal at this stage of the process. And the process isn't done. It's just the combine. There's pro days. There's whole other stuff that they're going to address. But it seems like that's a pattern that they're looking at here. Is there a sense of do you have any sense of direction of where you think the Steelers want to lean with this draft class? Like, obviously you want guys that are a lot more locker room oriented, guys that are more team oriented, but talent wise, athletic wise, I think that there's a few different directions we could see the Steelers prioritizing in this draft class.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of 3 positions right now at 20. I think it's corner, center, or tackle. And you know what Omar Khan said about Broderick Jones and his preference to have him play left tackle. We know that the left tackles are going to come off the board early. Joe Alt's going to be gone.
Yes.
Fashanu from Penn State will be gone. So you're going to have right tackles to choose from. I doubt that J.C. Latham's going to be there, but he met with the Steelers. But Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, there's more too. Those are the types of guys who could be there at 20, and it would make perfect sense for them to do that if you're going to move Broderick Jones over, because Dan Moore really can't play on the right side. And, we've been told that, and that's kind of a sticking issue with his long-term future, short-term future with the Steelers and long-term future as a backup in the NFL. Because, if you can't be a backup, if you can't be a swing tackle, then you're probably not going to be a backup in this league. So that's an issue that Dan Moore, has to tackle this offseason.
Right. And the Steelers did sorry, no, keep going.
No, I always going to say was center would be a possibility too, if you have a strong feeling about any of those guys, Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson. That's definitely in play, but we all know what the value of center is and where they usually get drafted. They do not usually get drafted as high as 20. And then corners. It's kind of a wild card. 2016 was the last time the Steelers took one in the first round. Where Andy Weidel came from, the Eagles, they don't draft corners high. So that would be a little bit of, out of the box pick, I think. But it's a big need. And you look at that defense, we just talked about it in the previous segments. Other than Joey Porter Jr., there's not really a lot to fall back on among those corners on that Steelers roster right now.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the Steelers situation, man. They could go in so many directions with both free agency and the draft, and like I again, it's an advantage but also a disadvantage because you have so many needs, but at the same time, you become a lot harder to predict. I look at those needs and I keep weighing them back and forth. You know, what would be more important: the right tackle of the future, the cornerback of the future, the receiver of the future, the quarterback of the future. Granted, that's not in the cards right now as far as things that are available to the Steelers, but I think that I like the Steelers' chances. I'll say it this way: I like the Steelers' chances to go into draft day with their big board and the guy that they really think is the guy being there, unless I don't know who they're going to pick exactly, right? But they could getting the second or third offensive tackle there to complete the offensive line rebuild. Talisi Fuaga also talked about his relationship today because we're recording this Saturday. We spoke with him. He said he was getting mentored by Isaac Seumalo. And he talked about how he's a quiet guy, but when he talks, he learns. So I think there were some interesting tie-ins we saw today. Zach Barton, seemed like a good guy. So did Jackson Powers Johnson. So did Zach Frazier, who we did get to. So this is a great offensive line class. It's a great cornerback class, and those are the two I think biggest things the Steelers need to make sure that they hit on with this draft class.
Yeah, and like you said, Chris. Next week is really the last week of the offseason.
Right.
2024 new league year gets here with free agency starting March 11th. And you mentioned that the dominoes are going to start falling. And as they add a corner in free agency, I don't think it would necessarily preclude them from taking one. You always want to build that. You always want to build your roster out before the draft with a potential starting lineup. Right. And then your rookies come in and they supplant guys. So like last year, Levi Wallace, starter early, Joey Porter supplants him, right? Chukso Okorafor, starter until he gets supplanted by Broderick Jones. The issue the Steelers have right now is who's on the roster right now. James Pierce, he's even a free agent. So you don't even have, fringe guys. You would be talking about practice squad guys who would have to step in now. I mean, and we're talking about this assuming that Patrick Peterson isn't going to be here. And I think that's a strong possibility that he's going to get cut before the new league year. So, so when you look at it now, it's fun to talk, about the draft at the Senior Bowl. It's super fun to talk about it now at the Combine. But we're going to be able to pin down the Steelers even more, I think, by March 31st. Maybe April 7th. After that first and second wave of free agency goes through, we're going to have a better idea of their roster and which direction they might go in the draft.
Certainly. And that's and another thing to remind everyone, people are still getting cut. So there's certain players that could be added to the free agency pool that change up the market. Not saying it's going to happen, but every year feels like it does. So stay tuned with all the Steelers free agent moves. Stay tuned with all the Steelers, draft prep and all the things we're going to do. I believe we should be updating our big board soon for a post-combine update of all the top players at each position that we put together for fans to be able to explore. So stay on the lookout for that, as well as all of our reporting from here in Indianapolis. Ray, thanks so much for you and Jerry being great partners while we're out there and making sure we all got stuff done. I'm going to hit the road Sunday, be back Monday, and get back to the grind in Pittsburgh. But I think it was a productive combine. And again, we're recording this Saturday. So if you're sitting there, why didn't you talk about why Jackson Powers Johnson ran a 4.2 40-yard dash? Something crazy. Point being, we will be able to tabulate these things. And what I like to do after combines is going over the numbers and comparing them to previous years and previous players who turned out to be really good. All that will come with time. But this is just about our responses here. From Ray, from Chris, thanks so much for watching the North Shore Drive podcast on YouTube or listening to us on your favorite podcasting app. Back Wednesday with more here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.